Good afternoon, friends and colleagues and partners. It is 5 minutes past the hour, and we would like to use the remaining time of the hour effectively and efficiently. We are delighted to have you with us today in one of the important meetings that we are organizing prior to COP28. And focusing today on the Africa Climate Summit that will be held next week here in Nairobi, Kenya. And a lot of discussions have already started in preparation for the summit, with a number of events being planned. For us being engaged on this preparatory process is part of preparing for COP28. As you know, we have successfully managed to secure a faith pavilion at COP28. It will run from the 30th of November until the 12th of December. And with a number of organizations, currently around 30 organizations, partners with us, we are preparing for a successful event or series of events at COP28. Just a quick note that we have sent a request for expression of interest for holding sessions at COP28, and we received 112 or 120, and we're currently working on prioritizing them and evaluating their relevance and capacity to hold sessions during COP28. So hopefully in the next week or so, we will be communicating back with those the organization or coordination committee believes they have potential to contribute to the priorities of COP28 and priorities of the Faith Pavilion. Another piece of news is that we will also be holding a high-level faith leaders meeting or summit in Abu Dhabi on 6th and 7th of November. And it will bring together the highest level faith leaders along with some scientists, youth, women, and other political leaders to chart a sustainable way forward for the engagement of faith leaders. So, as probably most of you know, preparing for COP28 requires regional consultations, and there are 4 or 5 regions that are currently engaging in discussions between, politicians, political leaders, scientists, and so on, to identify the priorities of each region and how each region can respond to COP28 and the Paris Agreement. As I mentioned, next week, there will be a Africa Summit, which will also include prior, during, and after a number of consultations, including youth, women, and others. And we are very much delighted that some of you or us are engaged or engaging the faith actors and faith-based organizations and faith leaders in the discussion. So today's consultation will shed some light on a number of activities and actions and engagements being undertaken towards contributing to COP28. Of course, as you know, Africa is an important region for everybody. Some countries, indeed, in the Paris Agreement, in COP26, 7, the leaders of the world have called for a focus on Africa. Africa is a very rich continent in terms of its natural resources. However, it's a poor continent when it comes to support from the global community and access to sustainable energy, sustainable water resources, managing of its land resources, and so on. So a lot needs to be done to support this rich continent that actually contributed in one way or another to the development of developed countries. And you know the history of how Africa's resources have been used for the development, industrial development somewhere else. So it's time to pay back to Africa. It's time to focus on this continent and mobilize all needed scientific, technological, financial, and capacity resources to support this continent. Now, leaders in Africa have been putting plans through their national determined contributions, but also as a region through the Africa consultations, the AMSEN meetings, and this or similar climate change consultation meetings. And it seems that the priorities revolve around energy systems and industry, urbanization, of course. The expansion of mega cities in Africa is of concern, but of course of need to provide sustainable ways for human settlements, infrastructure, and transport. Land resources, desertification, deforestation, land mining, and so on are also on top of the agenda. But also the very essence of the livelihoods of the people and their economic development and so on. So these are some of the priority areas that will be discussed by the politicians of the summit. We have today some important colleagues and friends who have very much, we appreciate their contributions and their work prior and as we will notice during the Africa consultations and beyond, leading work on faith engagement towards climate change and towards climate or development in Africa in general. So we have three dear friends here on the call with us, and we will hear from them. We have, without any priority listing, we have with us Dr. Reverend Rachel Mash, a very long-time colleague and friend. Dr. Mash leads the environmental work of the Anglican movement, or what is called the Green Anglican movement. Reverend Mash is placed or works from South Africa, and she leads the different programs, including what is called the YES program, Youth Environmental Summit team. And she has been a dear partner of Faith for Earth and contributing to its different programs, especially the work on pollution, but of course other areas. We also have with us Mrs. Karimi Kinoti, whom we have recently been engaging with. I had the pleasure of being co-hosted on a podcast, and it's just clicked the amount of work that she's been doing on engaging religious actors, specifically talking about Christian Aid, as she is the director of special projects at Christian Aid. And she has been working on the engagement of faith actors at the Africa Climate Summit. Also, we have with us Roselyne Thirikwa, We have had the pleasure of engaging with SAINESA, where Roselyne is the Deputy Executive Director for the past 7 or 8 years, although the engagement between SAINESA and GNIP has been longer than that as part of the major groups and stakeholders. And SAINESA and, of course, the work of Roselyne have been very instrumental in mobilizing faith or young faith leaders, of course, from the Christian Catholic movement, but they have expanded their outreach to other religions and interfaith work, which is very much appreciated. So we will listen to the three colleagues and friends. Dr. Karimi will a bit be more expansive in terms of the preparations of the Africa Climate Summit, and specifically the role of faith actors and what they are preparing and how they are dealing with it and so on. But each of the speakers will present their own organizational perspective on the engagement and what they are preparing for that. So without any further ado, let me give the floor to my friend Karimi to enlighten us about the preparations for the Africa Climate Summit and the faith engagement. So Karimi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iyad, and a good day to all of you. I put together a short presentation, which Arne will support me with from his end, which is, in my understanding, really looking at how the Africa Climate Summit and the Africa Climate Week, which are coming together at the same time. I think for yourselves who are preparing and having consultations around the COP28 will be great if you are able to, listen to where are the connections, and I'd love for us to have that conversation together. So we can move to the next slide, which is really just to remind us around the COP28 presidency and how the sort of 4 key areas that the conference or the COP28 is expecting with regard to the paradigm shifts as has been put there. So I'm not going to really go into that because you, I assume, would be familiar with it. So areas of energy, climate finance, ensuring that people and nature are at the heart of climate action, and that it is an inclusive COP. Can move to the next one, please. So the Africa Climate Summit will be held here in Nairobi next week from the 4th to the 6th of September. The Africa Climate Week, which we'll get to in a minute, is from the 4th to the 8th. I think very much the emphasis on the week is, or activities around the week is the 7th and the 8th. So I think, when we look at what are the focus areas around financing, what is the opportunity for Africa, as Iyad has mentioned in his introduction, what does the climate action, as well as how, as we can all appreciate, when we're talking about climate, we can't leave out sustainable development. And then what does the financing or the capital optimization look like? So I think as we and we'll get on to the next slide in a minute, but you can see there that it's very much an investment summit. It's very much looking at the action side of the opportunity that climate change and climate issues present, and the summit is kind of taking a different narrative from looking at Africa as a victim. What are the opportunities there? And so you can see the registration, the events. There's also, of course, the political process that it is expected will conclude with a declaration by heads of state. I move to the next one. The next one you probably can't see very well, but this is like sort of the official program with lots of investments, opportunities for food systems transformation, for enhancing renewable energy, for investment on nature, biodiversity, etc., etc. So this is the official program. There's obviously also main events and side events, and I can make a comment about that in a few minutes. We can move to the next one, please. As I mentioned, the Africa Climate Week is simultaneous. These are the 4 tracks, and on the 7th and the 8th would be 2 sessions. After the summit has closed, then these 2 sessions around really building adaptation, resilience, as well as looking at innovation opportunities. There will be discussions around that. Next one, please. Faith actors engagement. I would say that this is a mixed bag at the highest faith leaders level. I would view this as currently low-key, and maybe when we get into question and answer, we can really look at what that might be. But having said that, under a civil society umbrella, especially the Pan-Africa Climate Justice Alliance, as well as Africans Are Rising, so there is a committee of non-state actors, of which one of the clusters and pillars is the faith actors. And so under that, a number of concerns have been raised about the summit, and really seeking to ensure that the gains, if you like, in terms of the negotiations, in terms of agreeing the Paris Agreement and agreeing how Africa stands. So we talk about common, but also differentiated responsibilities, that really is not lost in the summit. So here I'm just really sharing some of the demands that have been shared with the organizers of the summit, seeking to really ensure that it is an inclusive summit, that there are very clear principles around whatever will be discussed, and particularly what will be agreed. And I won't read this out, but I hope that you have seen some of what is being said there, and we will continue on to the next slide as well. That continues. So principles, what kind of solutions and narratives, ensuring that the historical responsibility, the differentiated, but those responsibilities are not lost on us. Now, I've mentioned side events that will take place, and some of these, if you look at the schedule, the official program, you won't really see faith actors mentioned in those. There was a very rigorous process by the organizers as to which side events would be accepted, on what criteria. A lot of the criteria was very much around investment opportunities, announcements that would be made. So you can see the kind of business side, so to speak. But there have been other opportunities in what's being called the action hubs, and a few faith actors. Some of you may be familiar with Mwangaza Light, for example, who will be hosting such. Alongside this, there is a People's Assembly, and this is very much really saying, well, there's at the very high level in terms of private sector and heads of government, the program, as I shared in that colorful presentation. However, where are the people? Can there also be an alternative space where ordinary people, those who be participating during this week, can also have an opportunity to engage on thematic areas, artists, more of that kind of format. Laudato Si is organizing, I believe, on the 4th, a march through part of the Central Business Center. There is also scheduled, I believe this is on the 5th, a faith leaders breakfast, for which there will also be a statement that is expected to be read. And then, as I mentioned, different kinds of conversations in a lot more of an informal setting. There is an expectation that there will be a people's declaration that can be shared with the high-level delegates to the Africa Climate Summit, very much along the kind of demands that I've shared. And then other opportunities, LWF, Lutheran World Federation, ACT Alliance, probably others who will use that opportunity also to have training events towards COP28, preparing delegates for COP28. I know for the ACT Alliance one, this relates to climate adaptation. And then, of course, the week also sits within season of creation, which I think Rachel might speak to, as really an opportunity also to bring faith community together. So this is very much, Annie, we can stop the presentation now. This is very much what is at hand. Behind the scenes, I can say a lot of engagement that some of us have had with the Secretariat of the Africa Climate Summit, including last night, to say, can we ensure that non-state actors, faith leaders can be part of the main events at the Climate Summit? And we're trying to put together names now. This is more from a respondent point of view rather than a speaker's point of view. But we continue to really put pressure and say this does need to be a summit that represents the concerns and the opportunities, the needs of the African people. Thank you. I'll stop there. Iyad.
Thank you very much, Karimi. This was a wonderful rundown of issues to be considered at the summit, and the efforts that you and others have been putting together to push the engagement of faith leaders. And I'm sure we need to always be there. We need to support the engagement at the highest level. And this is something that everybody is trying to do. And all the efforts are very much appreciated. And these efforts include the ones that we will hear about from Dr. Rachel Mash from the Anglican Church. So Dr. Mash, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iyad, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Could I ask Arne, please, to show my slides? Thank you. So I've been asked just to talk about a few of those 21,000 people who will be attending next week in Nairobi, and to talk about the Green Anglicans and how some of the young Green Anglicans will be taking part in the Africa Climate Week. Next slide. So just a little background information. What is Green Anglicans? Just go back to the previous one. So Green Anglicans started as the environmental network of the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, and it's now spread to 13 countries across Africa. And we have 3 levels of work. First of all, the base is connecting care for creation with our spiritual life, and then moving to local action, and now into advocacy. So this involvement in the Climate Week is on the level of advocacy. Next slide. So this map, I think, shows quite clearly why it is important that we talk about climate justice when we talk about the impact of climate change on Africa and the importance of Africa. This map shows the projected changes in agricultural productivity caused by climate change by 2080. So we can see that certain areas of Africa will lose their agricultural productivity by up to 50%, whereas some of the northern countries, their agricultural productivity will actually improve as the frozen areas begin to melt. So this is why the voice of Africa needs to be heard very clearly, and it needs to be a voice of climate justice. Next slide. So what is the position of the Anglican Communion? The Anglican Communion has signed the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty just recently. And next slide. And the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty has got 3 important things. Firstly, to end the expansion of coal, oil and gas. Secondly, a fair phase out of fossil fuel production. That means that the nations which have historically caused the emissions must transition fastest, and they must provide support so that others can transition. And the third area is the just transition, that no worker, no community or no country is left behind. Next one. So the important thing to understand about the whole process that we are in at the moment is that the Paris Agreement does not mention fossil fuels. The COP27 outcome does not mention oil and gas. It only mentions coal. So it is time for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty that we need to talk about fossil fuels. And as we look at the impact of the fossil fuel companies and the upcoming COP, somebody said, you cannot have a conference about malaria, which is run by the mosquitoes. It's important that we understand that in order to stop malaria, we have to stop the influence of mosquitoes, and the same with oil and gas. And if we don't even talk about them, how are we going to stop climate change? Next one. Last year, Liz Watuti, a Kenyan young climate activist, addressed the 600 bishops of Anglican bishops at the Lambeth Conference. So she said something very important. She said, you have a seat at the table. You must help make space for us. Faith leaders, particularly in Africa, have got a very strong seat at the table. They are respected. They can speak to politicians. They are heard. They are given opportunities. Young people don't. And so it's very important that the faith leaders make space for the young activists coming up. Next slide. Climate change is, after all, an intergenerational injustice. I've always been very impacted by this poster from a march that said, "You will die of old age, your kids will die from climate change." Next slide. The book of Deuteronomy says this, "I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live." We have a choice to make and we have to move fast. The window of opportunity is closing very rapidly. Next slide. So at COP26 in Glasgow, the young green Anglicans who attended joined other climate activists of faith. They came together and they formed the Climate Yes, Climate Youth Ecumenical Summit. Next slide. And as Christian climate activists from across the globe, they felt that there's a need to hold world leaders to account for the decisions and promises made at the COPs. And so Climate Ecumenical Summit was born as a platform to partner across denominations, organizations and countries, but most importantly, to pass the mic to the prophetic voices of youth. And that is why for this Africa Summit, we are prioritizing sending young voices to Nairobi. Next one. So in September, we held 3 hubs in Lilongwe, Malawi, Johannesburg, Nairobi, Italy, and the UK one online, where young climate activists of faith came together. And we've now got reps in 15 countries, 30 organizations, and 14 denominations are involved. And a partnership has been formed with the All Africa Council of Churches, with Christian Aid and Tear Fund supporting. Next one. So the goals of Climate Yes, I'm going to introduce you through the slides to some of the young people who will be attending Nairobi. This is Paul from Uganda, one of the Climate Yeses from Uganda. And the aim is to build the capacity of youth in the ecumenical faith communities, to do training and raising awareness, to help young people understand the policies, the processes of COP, sustainable development goals, loss and damage, to understand how to form partnerships and to form movements, and to identify collective grassroots level actions and climate commitments from the different hubs. Next one. So during Africa Climate Week, yesterday they already took part in the faith-based organization consultation, which is feeding into the Africa Climate Youth Summit. And then that will feed into the Africa Climate Week. And the hope is all those discussions and visionings and questionings will then be fed into the COP process later in the year. Next slide. So there's 6 thematic areas that the faith-based organizations are looking at: energy transition, green minerals, sustainable agriculture, sustainable infrastructure, natural capital, and green mobility. Now, young voices need to be seen as part of the solution. We must remember that 60% of the continent of Africa is under 25. So it is an amazing powerhouse of energy, ideas, and visioning. Next slide. So this is Irene. She is the Climate Yesa from Kenya, who will be attending next week. Now, these are some of the challenges that are being faced this week that these young people are going to have to speak into, and some of them were raised by Karimi. And a letter was sent out, which has been signed already by over 500 NGOs, calling for a real Africa Climate Summit. Because the danger is that Africa's priorities of phasing out fossil fuel, promoting renewable energy, talking about Africa's food systems, water resources, and biodiversities are now going onto the back burner of the agenda of the summit. And the summit is foregrounding the interests of the West, namely carbon markets, carbon sequestration, and climate positive. That these little crumbs that will fall from the West will be discussed the most. These approaches will make wealthy nations and large corporations want to continue polluting the world, continue polluting Africa to Africa's detriment. Next slide. This is Bino from South Africa, who will be attending. So another concern is that the fossil fuel industry, Western interests, and the fossil fuel producing Africa countries want to hijack Africa's just transition. Gas should not be part of the just transition, but it is being promoted as part of it. We also need to avoid false solutions like carbon markets and geoengineering. We need to implement and adopt climate policies that promote a just and equitable phase out of all new oil, gas and coal projects on the Africa continent, in line with Africa's development interests and the recommendations of IPCC. And we need to cut public and private financing. Next slide. So this is Jessica Bwali, who will be attending. She's the climate yesa from Zambia, calling out for the overdue loss and damage climate finances. And it is quite significant that this meeting will be taking place during the season of creation. We know the season of creation runs from the 1st of September to the 4th of October. And the theme for this year is a mighty river of justice. Let rivers of justice and peace flow. So our prayer for these young people as they attend the Africa Climate, may they be strong, may they be bold, may they speak out for justice, and may they be part of this mighty river of justice that as all these streams come together, can really flow towards COP and turn COP around from a conference which is going to be on behalf of the wealthy nations to a conference which will really stand up for climate justice and make a change in this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rachel. And indeed, our prayers to Paul, Irene, Bino, and Jessica, and many other young people and faith voices who will be participating and speaking on behalf of so many of us. And of course, as you mentioned, the prophetic voices of not only youth, but everybody else. We need to start, talking differently than technology, than science, and so on. We need to talk of values and ethics and moral responsibility and our a sacred and divine responsibility towards Earth. And to continue listening to the young people, I would like to ask Roselyne to enlighten us of their engagement during the Africa Climate Summit. So Roselyne from SAINESA, please, the floor is yours.
Hello and a very good afternoon from Nairobi. I am glad to be here to represent the work of SAINESA, especially as we are engaging the faith-based organizations towards ICA. I will begin by giving a background of SAINESA as an organization. It was formed in 2014. Having been inspired by the message of Pope John Paul II on the World Day of Peace in 1990, where he called for the upscaling of ecological conversion. And from there, we have since then used the Laudato Si as our guide, as well as the Catholic social teaching. So far, we mainly work in three main thematic areas, that is formation and awareness creation, where we have done several formation sessions for young people around Africa. Right now we are in more than 10 African countries where we conduct formation so that we can enlighten the young people on the teachings of the Catholic Church, as well as Laudato Si being our guides. We also do networking and advocacy. We are accredited to UNEP, UNFCCD, and the Convention on Biodiversity, and this has given us an opportunity to advocate and have our voice heard as young people through the children and through the major groups for children. And that has given us an opportunity to be able to raise our voices and be heard. And the third area of action is supporting local grassroots environmental action through partnerships with various other organizations. And this has enabled us to do activities such as reforestation in some areas of the country. And we have been able to achieve some of our goals. So having mentioned our work, we were invited by the Africa Youth Climate Assembly to lead the faith-based organization engagement. And the Africa Youth Assembly will be held from 1st to 3rd of September, with the main theme being African-led solutions to global challenges. The primary objective of the Assembly will be seeking systematic embedment of voices of the youth in climate decision-making frameworks at country, national, and AU levels before, during, and after the Africa Climate Summit. The Assembly's strategy will be to provide African youth with a platform to present their declaration on critical environmental and climate governance issues to the heads of state at the summit. The final output document, the Africa Youth Climate Declaration, will clearly articulate the demands and ideas of the young people and will feed into the Africa Climate Summit Nairobi Declaration, the UN General Assembly, and COP28 and other regional and international fora. So the aim of the faith-based consultations is to engage young people across various faith traditions and faith-based organizations in the continent and collate the recommendations of the African youth of faith. These recommendations will feed into the Africa Climate Declaration. So as Reverend Rachel has pointed out, there are 5 thematic areas for the Africa Youth Climate Assembly. These are energy transition, and renewable energy, under which we invited people within our networks, young people within our networks, to make their contributions. This has been through various forums, the first being a meeting that we held yesterday, where we got to listen to the various contributions that young people had to make. The other is a Google form, which we are requesting young people of faith to fill so that we can understand what contributions they have to make with regards to the 5 thematic area. As I had mentioned, the first thematic area is energy transition and renewable energy. And under this, we got to hear from the young people present during yesterday's meeting, and we challenged them to give us the challenges that their faith communities are facing. And we had quite a number of challenges, including the fact that some of them have to rely on non-renewable energy sources for cooking, for lighting. The second question was with regards to whether clean cooking is a priority in their faith community, where some said yes, some said not really. And we proceeded to find out how their faith communities are promoting clean cooking, and we had several ideas of various organizations which are promoting clean cooking, and they told us they have been working on various methods of promoting clean cooking. And we also wanted to know whether there are any health challenges that they have faced that are associated with lack of access to clean cooking facilities. And it was pointed out that yes, there are health challenges that the young people have faced, including increased cases of asthma and other illnesses that are respiratory illnesses that are associated with breathing a lot of carbon and so on. So we also, as a conclusion to this thematic area, wanted to find out and still want to find out how these youth hope to engage the government in charting an energy future that encompasses energy efficient systems. And we hope to continue receiving responses through our Google forms. So on that particular area, that's what they had to contribute. On the second thematic area, which is with regards to green minerals and manufacturing, we had one concern that many of the youth do not really understand the term green minerals, basically because they feel that it is an imposition coming from industry, and they are ideas that are meant to baptize the term, the exploitation of minerals to be green, so that they can be further exploited without having a feeling of guilt. So there was an issue with the use of the term green minerals. Does it make it safer just because you have called them green minerals, or is it a genuine term? So we wanted to find out whether the youth are, one, aware of the minerals that are within their region, and we got to find out that not everyone is aware of which mineral resources are available within their areas, and some of the young people do not understand how, even though they know which minerals are in their areas, they do not understand how these minerals can be of benefit to them in providing for employment. For instance, if they feel that they haven't had employment opportunities through the industries, and hence have a small issue with manufacturing. And we also sought to find out whether these minerals have been used in the energy sector to make energy more efficient. We did not get much response in this area, especially with regards to the term or the production of green hydrogen. We felt that not everyone understands what green hydrogen is, and even those who understand what green hydrogen is, they have an issue with the fact that renewable they have an issue with the fact that renewable energy that could have been used in other ways is being used in the production of green hydrogen. So I will move on to the next thematic area, where there was lots to be contributed, given that this is Africa and the young people are energetic enough to be involved in this sector, that is sustainable agriculture, land, water, and ocean use. So we sought to find out that whether our respondents were aware of the blue and green economies, and we were glad to hear that they have a lot of information in the area. We also wanted to find out how many of our youth, who are contributing to these negotiations, are facing food security or food insecurity, and we got responses towards that, and how these challenges and how the challenges that are associated with food insecurity are leading them to a nature positive and environmentally friendly agri-food system, and how exactly their faith communities are helping them transition to a more nature positive and environmentally friendly agri-food system. So that is still in the progress. We're still trying to find more responses so that we have a satisfactory answer that we will be able to present to ICA for them to include in the declaration. So the next the next thematic area is sustainable infrastructure and urbanization, where we sought to find out what are the region's infrastructural challenges and the social and economic welfare of their faith communities. We also sought to find out how youth and governments work in collaboration to address these issues. You will realize that we as the youth are trying to move from a situation where we are always asking for government to help to being part of the solution. We hope to be involved in the generation of solutions to our various environmental problems, and that is why we are asking and our fellow youth which areas they think that they can contribute. We also sought to find out what kind of air quality is within the urban areas where the young people we were consulting with live in. Is it good, and what do they think can be improved about it? And we sought to link the health of the faith communities with which we are consulting to the air quality, as well as to the general quality of the cities in which they live in. And they said that they would wish for a city where everything was functional, transport was functional, and the air quality was good, and in areas where they have an opportunity where they can freely express themselves. The next session, the next thematic area was on natural capital, where we sought to find out which restoration activities the youth with which we are consulting with are participating in. Most of them said tree planting, which is a good thing, but we encourage them not only to plant the trees, but also to ensure that the trees grow to maturity. That is tree growth as opposed to tree planting. We also encouraged them to make to consider the issue of carbon credits, whether they are accessible to them or not, so that we can then use this as feedback to ICA and potentially feedback to the Africa Climate Week, whether they have access to carbon credits, and whether they think that this system will be of benefit to or detriment to their region. And we are also in the process of finding out whether the youth that we have are aware of the concept of loss and damage, and which demographic they feel that is highly affected by the issues of loss and damage, and whether loss and damage to them basically just means physical losses or even psychological losses, or it encompasses all types of losses. And if it does, then what metrics can be used to measure the other non-physical losses that they feel they might have experienced. And finally, we got to the last thematic area, which is climate mobility and mitigation. And we know that many of the regions in Africa have experienced some sort of climate hazard, and we sought to find out which climate hazard that they feel have affected them the most, and how they hope they can put structures in place that will sort of mitigate future climate hazards, and which gaps is it they feel that need to be addressed in terms of human mobility and climate change, what solutions they would like to generate, what solutions would they like to be a part of in regards to human mobility and climate change, and whether they feel that they have been meaningfully engaged and supported in providing solutions that are geared towards climate mobility, advocacy, and action. So we hope that we'll be able to summarize the findings of the consultations yesterday, as well as the findings from the various forms that have been filled. And this will be compiled and presented to ICA. We will also be very actively involved with the ICA Secretariat as they prepare their youth declaration, so that we make sure that our voices are heard, and this will eventually feed into the Africa Climate Week. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Roselyne. Thank you. That was an extensive and very informative information about your engagement and the youth engagement and the priorities and the thematic discussions and areas that you're focusing on. We very much look forward to receiving or reading the Africa Youth Climate Declaration. This will be very helpful in our calls when it comes to the high-level faith leaders meeting or the COP28 Faith Pavilion. So this would be a great contribution to those. And you have mentioned so many areas of importance. One of them on mining, and probably next week or on the 7th of September, there will be an intergovernmental meeting in Geneva to discuss Resolution 5/12, which was adopted last year by UNIA. So, and I agree with you, there needs to be a clear definition of green mining, green industry, green whatever. Exactly, we need to know. I mean, extractive industry in general is a destructive industry. So how to green it requires a lot of discussions and scientific facts, and of course industrialization and development has to continue, and we need some minerals for the development of the people, but it will need to be not to be on the expense of the environment and livelihood of the people. So thank you. I think we have gone over time already, but I will allow for a few minutes of questions, although the other meeting has just started, but my colleagues can manage that until I join. So please, I see my dear friend Kosumita with her hand up. So please go ahead, Kosumita.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I just want to express gratitude to the three speakers for these incredibly informative presentations. The Parliament of the World's Religions just had a convening in Chicago with over 8,000 people where climate action was a major theme, but no time for details. I want to express special gratitude to Rachel for bringing forward the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. We have endorsed it, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Climate Action Working Group of the Committee of Religious NGOs in New York City, where I'm speaking to you from. And I think it's safe to say that the Conference of the Parties, the upcoming COP in United Arab Emirates, the COPs are losing credibility. That the credibility of the COPs is shaky, and I'm interested that there's been so much discussion of what amounts to a sort of a struggle to bring non-state actors and faith communities into the process at all. So I just want to say on behalf of Parliament and others that the credibility of the upcoming COP28 really depends on the binding agreement, and I know it's a long shot, of no new fossil fuel development, exploration and development, no new infrastructure of fossil fuels. We're also very concerned about government subsidies for fossil fuels. The IMF just released a major working paper. And so let me stop there, not to take others' time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kosumita, as always, bringing issues of importance to discuss. And well, I mean, the COP credibility has been questioned since the day one of the establishment of the COPs, because the COP should come up with long-lasting solutions, and it does not need to take 20 or so meetings to come up to an agreement. But I believe, our role, our efforts, especially the faith actors, especially this is the first time that we get a pavilion for faith actors. we need to be there in full, with all of our issues put on the table, so they can be considered, and hopefully there will be good results out of the COP itself. So I have, let me see, because I have Vince. Am I
Yes.
pronouncing? Yeah. Okay, please go ahead.
I'm Father Vincent, a Catholic missionary. I'm a member of the Laudato Si Action platform. I'm very happy to listen to the Anglican efforts for saving the environment, and their youth participation is very appreciative. Just want to have small clarification. What do you mean by green minerals? Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Father. Any other contributions? I don't see hands. So, thank you very much. Indeed, this has been very informative, very good way into introducing regional priorities, especially from the faith perspectives and youth. We look forward to engaging with all next week, of course, throughout the period of preparations for COP28. And let's all join hands in praying for the voices of sanity, voices of our responsibilities, voices of those who care for the sustainable livelihoods of the people living healthy on a healthy planet. So kudos to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us today, and hopefully we will see you in the upcoming thematic discussion in a couple of weeks from now. So thank you very much, and stay well, stay healthy, and stay blessed. Thank you.